Hello, Nerd Initiative fam. It's Max Taff coming to you with another recap of what we learned this week and last week on Agatha All Along's Darkest Hour, Wake Thy Power, and Familiar by Thy Side. Let's get into it. So, starting off with the incredible 1980s Cabin in the Woods inspired episode, that was just crazy. A lot went down, a lot of distrust amongst the coven, with Agatha especially. People really revealing their true colors. And I honestly think that even though everyone said this was supposed to be Agatha's trial, I really don't think so. I think it was actually Teen's trial. Given what we've learned about Teen, who is actually now known as Billy Maximoff, aka Wiccan, we do know that he is a witch, 100%. Real witch. There's no thoughts about it, no doubts about it. And I think this was truly his trial. The reason why I think so is the association with death never really stuck to me with Agatha. It never really felt right when they kept saying it was her trial. Especially when Lilia Calderu was talking about the blood moon, the associations between how the blood moon is at the time when the veil between the living and the dead is the thinnest. And come to know in this episode, we find out how Teen became William, who became Billy, or however that works. At the end of WandaVision, when Wanda's hex was collapsing, Billy's soul ended up in William Kaplan's body because of the car accident that had just transpired at the same exact time. William dies, Billy quickly takes over his body, soul gets transferred into his, vessel. And that's how we come to have Billy Maximoff in this show. Given how that all transpired, the whole death, living, resurrection kind of vibe that whole origin started with, that's what leads me to believe that this was actually Teen's trial. In this episode, we finally see Billy coming into his power at the end as he kind of takes over Lilia and Jennifer Kale and uses them as his proxies to throw Agatha into the mud on the side of the Witch's Road. Obviously, I thought that was pretty brilliant that he used them kind of sort of as his puppets to do his bidding instead of blasting Agatha or using his magic directly on Agatha, knowing she can absorb it, as we saw in that episode as well, with the terrible passing of Alice, which we'll get into in just a second. But that whole sequence was so brilliantly done. He was very smart to do that. And seeing him put on his crown with the Billie Eilish song playing it just hit the right notes, especially for me. I was just thinking, wow, what a badass. I love that whole sequence. It was a big reveal. I feel like we all knew it was coming. I tried to keep an open mind thinking, okay, maybe it's Nicholas Scratch, maybe it's someone else, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe they're changing the character. It is Billy Maximoff confirmed. So I'd love to see where that all goes and where that all kind of transpires from here. Now, let's get into some of the things that we learned in that episode, specifically with Agatha, her history. Her mom is back in this episode. Evanora Harkness, the woman you are, didn't get much better from her first appearance in WandaVision, but I am happy to see the continuity and that character carried over into Agatha All Along. So with that, I was very excited to see her back, possessing her daughter, turning her into this crazy exorcist style Linda Blair kind of thing, and she just looked wild. And just the things that we learn about the relationship between Agatha and her mother. Obviously, from the flashback we saw in WandaVision, it was a tense relationship. Her mom considered her evil and tried to kill her, execute her with the rest of their coven. Obviously, that backfired. Agatha ended up killing all of them instead. And, it just kind of shows a trend with Agatha's character specifically, where we see her in these moments of, wait, you're not understanding me. I'm not bad. I can be good. Trying to live up to the expectations of others, what they consider to be good, when in reality, she kind of lives in this gray area. She is a self-serving survivalist, and that's kind of what she discusses with Teen at the end of Familiar by Thy Side, where she talks about, don't be afraid of your power. Don't be, don't misunderstand, you're a survivor, which is done for centuries. It's who we are. And that, I think, goes to how she always has this kind of defense mechanism where it's like when people put her into these corners, accusing her of doing all these horrible things, she kind of just snaps and she's like, well, you know what? You want to see bad? I'll show you bad. And she kind of goes into what they expect of her, what they think of her. So it just kind of goes into that whole thing where psychologically where she's having these expectations put on her and she just wants to do things her own way. Not necessarily bad, not necessarily good. We really don't fully understand why Agatha was being executed by her coven yet. That hasn't been revealed yet. But we do know that the events surrounding that whole situation are always very heavily defended by Rio Vidal. Obviously, we are being led to believe there's some kind of a past between Rio and Agatha. There was some kind of a romantic relationship that took place between them. And we do know, based on trailers and flashbacks and things that we've been seeing in these little promo snippets, that Rio did know Agatha during that time. Rio is very protective of Agatha surrounding those events. I'm eager to see what happens, what takes place, and just how much of that Rio was involved with. One interesting thing that I'd like to point out is the fact that when Evanora kind of comes out and she sees Rio, she kind of like hisses or like growls at her at first. Like, she did not like seeing Rio. She was not happy to see her. So I thought that was interesting, that there's definitely some kind of a past. There's definitely some kind of a friction between them. Some things definitely took place back in the Salem days that, maybe she wasn't happy that Agatha and Rio were together. Of course, living in a puritanical society, that was not accepted. People were being burned at the stake and hung and drowned for being witches for doing a lot less than being in a same-sex relationship. So obviously, that might have been a contributing factor. Maybe the fact that Agatha and Rio were so chummy, bringing attention to their coven that maybe Evanora didn't like. We do know that she described her daughter as being evil and saying that she should have killed her when she came out of the womb, which is an awful thing for your mother to say. Obviously, Agatha has some serious mommy issues that are playing into that. So I'm interested to see how that relationship gets explored upon further in flashbacks. We know they're coming. I want to know what the relationship is between Agatha and Rio and Agatha's mother, and just kind of see where all of that goes, because there's clearly a lot of tension, a lot of past. And even in that moment when Agatha asks her mother, like, after all these years, you still hate me? And she's like, yes, I do still hate you. So obviously there's something that we don't know about Agatha and her mom and the coven, which led to the events of Agatha being put on this trial, them trying to execute her ending up executing her entire coven. There's still so much to unpack with that. I can't wait to find out what that's all about. So the next thing I want to talk about from that episode, Alice Wu. Is she dead? Is she not dead? Is she maybe only dead for now? I mean, in Marvel, you really never know. There's always that trope where characters die, then come back. We've seen it so many times, especially in a show about witchcraft. Anything is possible. There's so many rules that get thrown out the window, right, when it comes to that. But we do see in some of the recent marketing materials released by Marvel and promos released that there's a moment where Alice is laying down, seemingly like plumped up, not sucked dry of her magic, like would happen in this episode. And she's in her Hot Topic getup. Someone's running their finger down her face. It's a blackened finger. Could it be a Darkhold influence? Could it have been Rio Vidal bringing her back to life? I mean, I definitely think that we're not done with her character yet. I definitely think that she is coming back. Jock Schaefer said in an interview recently that she is dead, but death doesn't necessarily have to be permanent. She could be getting brought back to life soon. So, I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean anything when you read between the lines, right? So I'm interested to see how that all plays out as well. I would love that because I felt so bad. I mean, Alice was on top of her game. She had just defeated her generational curse in the episode prior. So it's just, I was like, come on, man, she can't catch a break. There was a very visible tonal shift in Alice's character where she seemed a lot lighter. She seemed a lot happier. She was bonding with Teen. They had this bond that had been continuing on from episode 3. And I loved that rapport they had. And I was loving that whole developing dynamic between them. So I'm really hoping that we get to see Alice back. I want to see her potential fulfilled. She was finally coming into her own as a witch. She finally defeated that generational curse. I was really looking forward to see her character continue developing. So I'm very excited to see how that goes. And I'm holding out hope that she is not fully dead and that those little snippets of scenes that we haven't seen yet that are released in the mid-season trailer and all that do come to pass. I'm very excited to see where that all goes. Now, the biggest reveal from this episode obviously was Teen is actually Billy Maximoff. And we do see him coming into his powers. Like I said, that whole scene was epic. But I just think there's so much to unpack with this. Like, I mean, where did he get that power from? We didn't see him in the following episode using his power, his blue magic. We only see it on the Witch's Road. So how did he tap into that? And how did he tap into it so well to where he knew to control Lilia and Jen like that? How he had that control over his magic. There's a lot of magical detail given in this episode. We do see Agatha draining Alice of her powers, of her magic. Now, with that whole scene, let's talk about how things can kind of be instinctual with magic, right? Agatha had just been possessed by her mom. Alice blasts her with her magic, blasts her mom's ghost out of Agatha's body. And Agatha kind of comes to and immediately is just like sucking Alice's magic out of her, right? Using her own ability to cipher magic to suck the energy from Alice. Now, even though Teen at the end of the episode, or Billy, is accusing Agatha of doing it on purpose, Agatha is like, no, I didn't do that on purpose. I couldn't control it. I do think that however Agatha got this ability, whether it was through Mephisto or the Darkhold, or however she acquired this, ability to siphon off other witches' magic, I do think that is something that she has trouble controlling. Now, there's a couple theories I have with this. One could be that maybe she accidentally drained her son, Nicholas Scratch. Could be, that she, in trading Nicholas Scratch, obtained this power along with the Darkhold. So many avenues yet to explore with this series and how Agatha, got that magic, got that power. But I do think, once Evanora was blasted from her body and Agatha kind of came to, it was sort of that instinctual need to drain. If there's power coming into you, right? And let's say, based on just regular human standards, when we're hungry, if you're hungry, if you've ever been starving, you haven't eaten all day, you get home, you open the fridge, you're ravenous, you're eating whatever is there. Maybe that's what it was. There's some power there. She's just this empty battery at this point, completely starving for power and just sucking it all up that's coming into her, and she couldn't stop herself until Teen kind of snapped her out of it with the Nicholas Scratch comment. I think that was the moment that she realized that he wasn't her son, Nicholas Scratch, because she could hear him say it. There was no sigil. So obviously that was kind of the final confirmation in her mind, okay, this is not my son. And even if she didn't believe it was her son, maybe that just mentioning of her son just kind of brought it out, because no one really knew his name. So maybe that just hearing that kind of brought her out of that whole trance that she was in, sucking out Alice's magic. So, now going into Teen's actions at the end of the episode, I think it's crazy how he was so hypocritical of Agatha, talking about, oh, you killed Alice, you killed her, you're only in this for the power. Meanwhile, he just goes murders Agatha, murders Lilia and Jennifer. Obviously, we know from the promos and whatnot that they're not dead. They are coming back in the future episode. And Agatha wasn't killed. She dragged herself out of the mud like she always does. She's a survivor. But he just goes and murders them. And after he just berated Agatha about her draining Alice and killing her. There's just a lot to unpack with that. I think that going into the instinctual magic, I think that was his instincts. He was so upset and angry about her taunting him, her bringing up his mother, seemingly knowing something about him he didn't even maybe know himself, that kind of activated that magical response from him. And we even saw a little bit of this in the very first episode when Agatha's taunting the other witches when the witch's road didn't work. It didn't open at first. The Salem Seven are descending upon the house. She's like, blasphemy, you witches. She's trying to get them angry, insulting them. You can see the power glowing in their hands, but they don't do it. That's that instinctual magic. It comes out, it's emotionally drafted from you. It comes out, through those emotional outbursts. So I think that is kind of where all of that was coming from. Now, moving on to the next episode, Familiar by Thy Side, we finally get that juicy backstory of Billy Maximoff's, aka William Kaplan, aka Teens, where we finally learn exactly what happened. And I loved how they started off with this crazy awesome Jewish representation. He's at his bar mitzvah, his 13th birthday, kind of throwing it back to that third episode again, where Teen kind of reveals to Alice a lot of crazy stuff happened to me at 13 too. We're seeing how he has these connections, these either through destiny or fate or what have you, where he's meeting these other witches, right? And he meets Lilia Calderu. He has a connection to Jennifer Kale. He's a fan of her online videos. We see him, meeting Alice at the car accident scene. And there's all of these little intertwining bits of fate, right, that are pulling them all together. It's kind of like that rule of the coven, right, that Agatha talked about in episode 2, where she's saying that, within that mile radius, there's magically able people to make a coven with. Maybe that's also part of that whole thing, what draws them all together. So I think that's very interesting to kind of note and kind of, tuck away for later. But we do see him first come into contact with Lilia, still as William Kaplan. She reads his palm and she sees that his lifeline is divided in two. Interesting, kind of given where the episode ends, how he ends up becoming Billy Maximoff. And really interesting to kind of dive into Lilia's character here. And I'm going to get into a really interesting theory that I have with Lilia and talking about, these random outbursts she seems to have. Obviously, she's a divination witch. She's psychic. She can see the future. And in last episode in the cabin, she mentions the fact when they're there, they see the Ouija board is obviously communing with the dead as part of the trial. Teen instantly thinks it's going to be her trial. And she kind of clarifies, no, actually the communing with the dead thing was just a bit that I was doing. My power is, predictions and time. She mentions time in that episode. Now, what I think has been going on with Lilia from the get-go with her power and with these random outbursts and her seemingly, stating something and then all of a sudden snapping out of it and not remembering anything she said, is the fact that I think that she has the ability to time slip. She's able to go into her past and future versions of herself for brief moments and kind of, revisit the past or revisit these moments that we've seen. We saw it in 3 when they're doing that trial with the potion, the very first trial. She slips into the past. She's seeing, hallucinations of her past self. Then she's saying things like, we got to save Agatha, things that don't really make sense at the time, but I do think that they are going to make sense in a future episode, maybe even the next episode. I do believe that the next episode is going to be the divination trial. We're going to see Lilia back. We're going to see this being her trial on the Witch's Road. From promos and trailers we've seen that hilariously, as I discussed in my last video, they kind of put each member of the Coven into this witch trope, right? We see Lilia as Glinda the Good Witch from Wizard of Oz. We see Agatha as the Wicked Witch of the West. We see Billy Maximoff as Maleficent. We see Jennifer Kale as the hag version of the evil queen from Snow White. So that to me is really interesting given the fact how Lilia always has this chip on her shoulder about how witches are portrayed in society. She's made constant references to how people think witches eat babies. They think that they have warts. They think that they, wear pointy hats. So I think this is going to be really interesting how they're tying that into her trial. And the reason why I do think it's her trial is there are some scenes in the background of those trailers where you can see tarot cards. Now, why is that interesting? Again, during these moments when Lilia is kind of time slipping or going back and forth or making a prediction, she's kind of disassociating. She always says the name of a tarot card. In this episode, it was Reverse Tower card. When she saw Jennifer Kale, she mentioned High Priestess, which is another tarot card. In each episode, she's mentioning tarot cards, which I think have to do with her trial. I think, this is my theory, that her trial, she will be time slipping back to these pivotal moments that we've seen her getting kind of disassociated with throughout the series, and it will make sense as to why she was slipping, the weird things that she was saying. Because even Teen said in the last episode, when she said something about there was that screeching noise when Agatha was first getting possessed, Teen said, Lilia's being weird again, and then Lilia said something like, this wasn't as fun the first time. She seems to be revisiting these moments from a future point back into the past. So I do think there's some kind of time slipping going on here. I do think it's part of Lilia's trial. I think she is, slipping back and forth into these moments that they've already experienced along the Witch's Road. And I do think that Lilia, when she was reading William's palm in the tent at his bar mitzvah, she slipped into, maybe the future version of herself slipped into the past. And she read his palm and she realized something that was going to happen. He was going to become Billy. There was going to be this transformation. So she put that sigil on him in that moment in a way to protect him or to influence future events. That's why she did it. And then if you noticed, right after she did that, she put it in his coat, and then all of a sudden she kind of snapped back out of it, and she looked at the coat. She didn't know what she was doing. She was confused. She gives the coat to his mom and says, I don't know which kid left this in here. Someone left this. Can you make sure they get it back? She didn't know what was going on. She didn't realize what she had just done. She didn't remember it, which is why she didn't remember the sigil when they first discovered it on the Witch's Road. So a lot of very interesting little threads to pull here. I do think that Lilia is going to hold a higher importance to this series than she has so far. I think that her power, the way she's influencing events, will come full circle during her trial. I think it's going to lead us down some really interesting things, maybe leading to Alice Wu coming back, maybe leading to Mrs. Park coming back. Deborah Jo Rupp did hint that her character might be coming back in future episodes. So we'll see. Fingers crossed. I would love that. I'd be so excited. And just touching on the whole sigil thing, not in a million years did I ever predict that it would be Lilia Calderou who put that sigil on Teen. So see, this is kind of leading into my theory that there's some kind of time-slipping shenanigans going on here, and I'm really interested to see how those events unfold. So let's see if I'm right. Now, some other theories that I have, and this is an interesting one that my podcast partner and I actually recently discussed, is the fact that, obviously given how Billy came to be, right? So we see on the way home from the bar mitzvah, there's this whole chaos going on, no pun intended, with the Westview anomaly. So the residents of Eastview know what's going on. I just love this little bit of world building. It was very reminiscent of when the MCU was exploring the aftermath of Thanos' snap after Infinity War, after Endgame, and those few projects afterwards. They were kind of showing little bits and pieces of how life was for the everyday person outside of these big Avengers level threats and this big world changing snap, right, that took place over 5 years. And it's kind of the same concept where we're seeing the other side of what was happening nearby with the Westview anomaly and Wanda's hex. So I thought that was really interesting to see how the other people who lived in Eastview nearby were kind of perceiving that whole thing. They have to evacuate the bar mitzvah. Everyone's going home to be safe. There's some craziness going on. They're in the car on their way home, and there's a crash. William dies in that car as Wanda's hex is collapsing, and it seems like Billy's soul gets transferred into his empty vessel at that point. So it's really interesting to see how that all worked out, and I thought it was a very organic way for them to do it. From the beginning, I've been saying, if they're going to make this character Wiccan, if they're going to make this Billy Kaplan, Billy Maximoff, whatever, they have to make it make sense. Marvel has to make it make sense for the casual audience, for us viewers, for the comic fans. They have to handle this very delicately in order to make it make sense, because up until this point, we understood that Wanda's children were fake, created by her magic, but they existed somewhere else in the multiverse. And obviously, Wanda couldn't find them in this universe. She was searching the multiverse for them. Now we come to understand the reason why she couldn't see or feel or find Billy was because of that witch's sigil. So there's a little bit more to this with Lilia's sigil that I think will be getting revealed in the next episode, maybe to protect him from Wanda. She was influenced by the Darkhold. At that time, she needed to protect Billy in that moment for that time, to protect him from his own mother, because she was searching for him and she wasn't in that right state of mind. But honestly, I'm kind of wondering how these children of Wanda's became real tangible souls and were able to transfer into other bodies. Now, we still don't know what happened to Tommy. We know that Billy said that he could sense Tommy, but couldn't find him. So that plays into things. But it remains to be seen if Tommy actually has a body or if Tommy is just a soul floating out there. But what formed them into souls? Does Wanda have the power to create souls? Here's my theory, is that just like how Wanda said that Vision was the part of the Mind Stone that lives within her, I think that Wanda put actual pieces of her soul into these boys when she created them. Kind of similar to how a mother makes a child with her body, Wanda used her magic and put a piece of her soul into these kids when she formed them. And I think that those pieces of her soul were released once the hex was gone. Or instead of going back into Wanda, they were kind of released into, or at least in Billy's case, released into the nearest empty vessel, which kind of flows into a comic accurate sort of storytelling, right? Now, this also kind of leads me to think that, maybe those pieces of her soul that she put into these boys that are now out of her allowed the Darkhold to kind of take over, or that darkness kind of took over that empty part of her soul, and which is why she was so overtaken by the Darkhold's darkness and, the dark magic of it all. More so than even Doctor Strange. We saw Doctor Strange kind of dabbling with the Darkhold. He wasn't as consumed by it. Maybe that's because Wanda had that empty part of her soul that the Darkhold was able to inhabit. So just some interesting little tidbits to kind of ponder over the next few weeks. And maybe that's how she got so corrupted in Multiverse of Madness. Maybe that's why these boys ended up having real tangible souls that were able to transfer into corporeal bodies. I'm sure it'll all get explained, but that's just my current theory on that. Now, my last theory for this episode kind of has to deal with what we saw at the end, where we saw Agatha and Billy finally realizing each other, leveling with one another, and addressing the fact that yes, he's Billy Maximoff. She knows who he is. He knows who she is. He doesn't trust her. They're discussing their motivations for being on the road. It's revealed that Billy is looking for Tommy, which I understand, but I just really wish he was looking for Wanda. I just want Wanda back selfishly. So I'm just hoping for some Scarlet Witch resolutions by the end of this series, or at least some hints as to where her character is going by the end of it. But one interesting thing I have about Agatha and this whole mothering role she's taken on with Teen or with Billy throughout the series, and just the revelations about her son and what we still have yet to learn about her and what has gone down in her past. If she really did give her son away for the Book of the Damned or for dark magic of some kind or what have you, is her final trial to get her own power back to help Billy get his mother back, helping a son find his mother instead of a mother giving away her son? Could that be kind of like the yin and yang to the situation, where at the end of the road, that's kind of going to be her final task, to help Billy find Wanda, helping her enemy come back, become resurrected, whatever you want to call it. I do think that there's some kind of a symmetry that's quite beautiful in that particular storytelling that I think could really work nicely for the finale of this series, or towards the end of this series, when it comes down to, Agatha and what her role is, maybe using the part of Wanda's soul that's in Billy to bring her back, kind of what I was just talking about. So, a lot to unpack with that as well. I'm very excited to see how their dynamic shifts from here now that they are, aware of one another and of what's been going down. I'm really interested to see how that all plays out. I'm really excited to see these next few episodes that we have left. Perfect October show. I'm so happy they decided to air it during this time. It's been such a delight every week. So you can follow me on Twitter for more theories and fandom rambling at Vigilante Vibes. Please check out my podcast for more in-depth breakdowns and all the Marvel news. Vigilante Vibes, a Marvel podcast streaming on all platforms. Don't forget to like and comment to let me know your thoughts on today's theories video. Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss out on any of Nerd Initiative's amazing content. Thanks for watching and join me again next week. Bye.